Howdy tours, welcome back to the Zach Life. So in real time today, for me, today is Memorial Day. I know y'all won't see this for quite a while, but for all that served, thank you very much. So I made a big mistake. I made a goof. It's going to be an expensive one, and we're fixing to go work on it. First things first though, I got to get some tools and a cheeseburger. Zach's hungry. Well, I got screwed out of my burger. I didn't think about I'm not cooking today up there. I had to go to Allsup's instead. Luckily, when you go to Allsup's and get you a burrito, they give you a whole bunch of extra napkins for later. All right, so here we are. What are we doing? So I have actually already done a video about this well. I'll put a link to it. I'll put a link in the description. That's the easiest way to do it. I was basically given this lease. There's 4 or 5 wells out here. It didn't make hardly anything. I saw some potential. I have got quite a bit of stuff about a mile that way. And that way as well. It's sort of right in the middle of the majority of our stuff. And I actually did some initial work on it, fixed the well, had to work on an injection well, and it looked like this thing was going to be an absolute home run. And it went downhill, and I spent a small fortune on it, and that's what that other video is about if you'd like to watch it. Now, we didn't get it fixed. It came back. It makes about 3 barrels. It turned out to be a pretty good well, but we have had another Zach screw up. Now, I'm going to give myself a little bit of leeway here. This thing, when we bought it, looked about like this, and you can always tell if you have, you know, a gearbox doesn't use oil. If there's not oil under it, it hasn't, you know, it's still in it. And when we bought this, it looked about like this, and it leaked pretty bad. And I watched it and checked it for months, and it never seemed to really get very low. And I did put oil in it one time. It's got this goofy little dipstick. That's not a dipstick. You just fill it up till it's, you know, runs out that T. And I think probably that this is not the right oil level, and this had the oil level critically low. And you know, what little bit extra leaked out, you know, a couple of quarts, it actually ran out. And that's what has happened here, is this thing has ran out of oil and thrashed this gear and this gear and probably the bearings and who knows what the heck else. We're going to scatter this thing and fix it. This thing is weight heavy, meaning when it sits there statically, the weights are trying to go down. The gearbox is locked up. That's why it's sitting where it is. First thing I'm going to do is take a chain come along. We'll go from the bottom of the head down the skid and pull it tight, and that'll keep everything stable so we can unhook and disconnect the arms and whatnot. All right, I'm gonna grab the impact wrench, pull these 2 bolts off, and this will disconnect the arms from the wrist pins. Those will probably stay just good enough to come loose and whack me in the head in a minute. This poor little thing's had a hard life. That other one over there kind of fought me, but I got it off there. I have actually never had one of these Idacos like this apart, but all I know to do is start pulling bolts out of it. Well, I didn't realize they're actually bolts, not studs. I need to start bringing a tripod with me, but it's just one more piece of crap to carry around. Well, that didn't work, did it? Y'all dizzy yet? Okay, so like I said, I've never actually had one of these boxes apart. I don't know if this is a cap that goes up inside there or if it's just like a flange that holds a seal. But well, I can just leave it there either way till we get this apart. It's got these that look like big freeze plugs. I guess there's a seal in here, I'm not sure. But it's got some pusher holes. They look like they're 1/2 inch. All I know to do is to start pushing on it and see what happens. See if I can twist some bolts off. I should have got a tap or something. I don't have any taps with me. Ah! How many of y'all saw that? I want to be careful and not bust this case. I don't know how tight the pins are here, but being cast iron, if I get it in too big a bind, it'll be easy to break. All right, I think that thing probably weighs over 200 pounds. I was thinking I'd be able to just pick it up and set it off there. I'm going to try to tilt the back of it up and just let it crash forward and land in the front of the gearbox there. See if I can keep my fingers out of the way. Just like that. So I want to talk about this setup. This doesn't actually have seals. It's kind of an interesting setup here. Oil wells have got these. I like them. They work pretty well if they don't get stopped up. So this washer here does two things. It actually holds a little bit of oil sort of in this little cavity here where the bearing is, and it keeps the bearing from being able to walk around. It's a stop for the bearing. This here is it's got a slinger, and this has actually got an O-ring on it. It's supposed to have, I believe, a little brass piece. This is not what's supposed to be there. I didn't realize this when I took it apart. It's supposed to have a little brass slinger. I'll probably put an O-ring back on it. I guess it works. So that as the shaft spins and oil comes out here, it slings it off the edge of that O-ring. It can't crawl back over the edge of the O-ring, and it slings it off inside here where these little holes are, and it runs down back through this trough back into the case. It's really a good design. I really like the setup. The big problem is if you get a bunch of sludge and crap built up in these troughs, well, if they run over, then there's nothing, you know, the oil just runs out of the case. So I'm gonna gather all this crap up and haul it back to town. Okay, the next thing I've got to do is the shaft. This gear is made on a shaft, and we've got to press all this, you can't see my finger, that way. Sometimes these move pretty easy, sometimes they're stupid tight. Hopefully this thing will move. I'm gonna get it to move, and then when this race gets down against his shoulder, I'll take something else and push. Oh yeah, easy. About 5 tons. Just what we're wanting. We got a little bit of scoring here, but nothing looks bad. So this is got a tapered key. So this shaft here is not tight in the pulley. It's about the same size. Like, you know, take a hammer, knock it on there pretty easy, or it might just slip on just barely. And then after you get it on there, you take this tapered key and you drive this key in there, and it, you know, gets tighter and tighter, and it's what gets everything tight. The way I like to try to get these off here is to take a chisel or something and wedge this so it can't go down, and then push on the shaft, and usually the key will stay there, and as this moves out, it releases the key. that's so closer, I don't know if I'll get anything under there or not. What I can't do is push on the outside of this sheave. You know, it would bust this sheave. So I got to take a couple of these plates to where we're pushing against this, you know, cast iron hub in here. These spokes would not nearly be strong enough. Okay, so I just ran a segment talking about how it's important to always measure stuff before you go to press it together. And long story short, we have a problem, and so I'm going to start this over and talk about the problem we have. Okay, so here's a gear I got made. This gear cost $2,300, and for one reason or another, the hole here is too big. I would like to talk about micrometers really quick. This is a micrometer. This is used to precisely measure something. This is a 1 to 2 inch mic. This is a Chinesium, probably Pittsburgh Harbor Freight. Nothing special, but it has an accuracy of within about a 1/2,000th of an inch. Is where I would stop here. So this is 1 inch plus 975. Each revolution is 25 thousandths. That would be 1.9 inches. 1.95, 1.975. This is a bore gauge. So this is a little spring-loaded doohickey, and how this works is it's got a I'm not sure what you would call this, like a clamp or a stop here. When you screw this down, it locks this in. And so how you use this is we'll go down in here and release it at an angle. Can you see the angle? Snug it up slightly, and then we will, this is clean in here, I'll wipe this out with a rag, and then we will straighten this up and cam it over and tighten it down. And then we can measure this. And we will turn this just until we get slight contact on that bore gauge, lock it down, and we are 1 inch, 875, 6, 7, 8, and almost a half. Okay, so 1 inch, 1/875 is 1 inch and 7/8, and so we're about 3 1/4 to 3 1/2 thousandths larger than 1 7/8. Now I have measured this several times. The measurement we just got is probably a little bit big. I have been measuring it exactly 3 thousandths over 1 7/8. Yeah, right there, 3 thousandths over 1 7/8. Okay, so here's the gear. This part right here is where that gear presses onto this gear. This measures about 2 1/2 thousandths, between 2 and 2 1/2 thousandths over 1 7/8. So this is actually about a 1/2 thousandth smaller than that other gear. It won't quite slide into it, but you can start it in there and kind of turn it by hand and work it on there about this far. I took a rubber mallet and whacked it and drove it on that gear. That won't work. The only thing that holds that gear on is the press fit. It's got to be tight. I called the guy back that made the gear, and I said, hey, it fell on there, it's too big. And he said, well, let me call the gear shop and see what the spec is supposed to be. He said, but you know, we've got the old Attico books, and we were supposed to have made that to exactly what the gear spec called for. I think what happened, the only thing that makes sense to me, is that gear is supposed to be 1 7/8 exactly bore. The gear I pressed off here was 1 7/8 bore. It was about 1 7/8 and a 1/2 thousandth. And this is 2 1/2 over that, and so we're supposed to have about a 2 1/2 press fit. The interference fit between this and the old gear was about 2. I measured, like I say, I measured that, and it's about a half over 1 7/8. So I think that he probably cut the gear wrong. However, I've got to make the point said, because there's going to be a lot of people that know me personally that know who I'm talking about here. I'm not bad-mouthing him. There is certainly a possibility that these gears aren't original, and that whoever made these gears made them as a set, and they were a slightly different size. It's possible that the Idaho book didn't call out nominal numbers. It wasn't 1 7/8. It was just, you know, 1 inch, 0.87, what would that be? 70, say 80. 1 inch 880, you know, for the shaft. And whoever made these gears, or some point in Idaho's, you know, when they built these, they made them a little bit different size. There's absolutely that possibility that what he made me is to spec, but I've got something oddball. The only reasonable way to fix this, even if this is 100% his fault and he screwed this gear up, the only reasonable way to fix this is to make this gear bigger. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to look for between 2 and 3 thousandths press, 2 being minimum, 3 being maximum. These gears are often made out of a good piece of steel, and if you weld on, they will be really hard. And what we're going to do is I'm going to put this in the machine. I'm going to cut about 150 thousandths off this, so that when we weld on it, we won't have to get back to this metal, because this often gets really hard. I had another video about the 101-year-old oil well that ate my lunch. I didn't do this. I just went home and welded on it, and that's the first time I ever done it. It'll be the last. Pardon my lathe, it is quite a mess. This is actually parts. You haven't seen that video yet. Never mind. You'll see that at some point in the future. Okay, so I ran home and welded on this. There's no use in you watching me weld. Hopefully I got this built up enough. It's always kind of hard to guess. I tried not to consume the keyway. I got in it just a little bit right there. Hopefully it'll still be tight enough to hold the key. Let's chuck this up and get the whacking on it. The gear measures 1 inch, 878 thousandths. We're going to shoot for 2 thousandths press, which puts us at exactly 1.880. 2 thousandths will be just right. If we get anywhere between about 1.5 and 3, we'll be all right. There won't be anything wrong with 3 thousandths, but it'll probably be kind of tight. Just FYI, what I did here, I took duct tape, wrapped about 2 wraps around the gear and 2 wraps around right here. It melts on there and is a good barrier for weld BBs and whatnot. It takes a little bit to get it off, but you usually hit it with a wire brush or whatever. I'm gonna hog this out, get it round, make sure we got enough metal there, and then we'll go from there. For those of you that are screaming saying you're dragging that tool backwards, you're correct. The reason for that is, though, is when you've got an interrupted cut like this, at least in something screwed up as this, when you got a tool that's laying closer to flat against your workpiece, it'll sort of drag it over. It seems like the interruption's a little bit better. I don't know if that's true or not, but in my experience, my limited experience, it is. So right now I'm setting at 1 inch 905, and so 880 to 905 would be 25 more thousandths. I was wanting about 30. We'll split the last cut up here into 3 cuts. The next cut I'll take 10 thousandths, and then we'll measure it, see where we're at, and we'll split that in half. By doing that, by taking 3 cuts at the end of the same, roughly the same amount, it will cause the load in this tool, or the springiness, if you would, of this machine will be somewhat equal. That'll give us a better chance of hitting exactly where we want to go. I'll actually shoot for about 1/1000th bigger, for about 801, and then we'll sand off that last thousandth to get us right where we need to be. Okay, so I got 18 thousandths to go, will be 881. This surface finish is not real good. I'm going to speed the machine up from 182 RPMs to about, let's say 415. And I'm going to slow my feed rate from, it's probably about 8 thousandths right now to 4. 881, a little bit on the tight side, but that should be about 3 thousandths press. That'll be just fine. As long as you can get it in there, it's always better if it's a little bit tight than a little bit loose. The only part about this job that I'm not real proud of is going to be this keyway, but we're going to run anyway. You know, it's got this porosity, or it's not really porosity, but you know, I didn't get enough weld, and that's not going to make any difference at all. There's plenty, you know, there's plenty of meat for this to be tight. I'm hoping this keyway will go back in here and sit down good. I guess let's go see if we can press this thing together. Okay, I got some nickel-based anti-seize. I'm gonna dope this pretty good here. This will help this thing from galding. It'll help it go together. Ooh, that's a little tighter than I wanted. Nah, it freed up there. Got tight for just a second. So I'm about 5 tons, and what I don't want to do is break this gear. Yep, it's got up to about 10. It's fell back to about 8. I just thought about something. This gear's got to go one way, and how much you want to bet I just put it on backwards? I got to go get the other gear to see if I put this on the right way. If not, I'm gonna put it on the right way, and I'll catch you in a minute. So by nothing other than luck, it was correct. So I'm going to heat these races to put them on the intermediate shaft and the high-speed bearing in the high-speed shaft. I like heating them more than I do pressing them. If you press them, you take a chance of breaking them. I have bought a new toy, so to speak. This is a Amazon deep fryer, and I have some vegetable oil. I don't know why I'm using vegetable oil other than, well, it's a deep fryer. That's what you put in it. If we get done with the bearings here, maybe we can make us some French fries or something. Looks like a good way to heat those things. I didn't realize till this now that's a metric temperature gauge. What am I trying to say? Thermometer. I'd like to get these to at least 400 degrees. I got this as a driver. If this doesn't go, hopefully I can give it a good whack, get it on there. I'm I'm going to wipe the oil off here before I grab it with my glove for obvious reasons. Let's see what happens. Looky there, looky there. Yep, got tight there. Alright, that's good. I was worried about this one. Yep, just needed a tap. There she went. Alright, this is 3 days later. This is Friday. I'm not going to get this done today, but I'd like to get the case cleaned out, and I'm going to at least have to take this back to town. Yeah, see, now that I've got this cleaned out, that's about the level the oil I thought would be full. This thing, the reason it hadn't been leaking is because it hadn't had any oil in it in 2 years. Okay, these holes here are the drain back holes I was explaining, where the oil that drips off this shaft, off the bearing, runs out towards the outside of the case just naturally. It just runs down that hole and back into the case. There's no actual seals. If those get plugged up, the oil will just run on out of the case out the end here, and that's obviously not what you want. I know a lot of y'all are going to be screaming I'm a hack job. These don't need to be perfectly clean. They're not engines. This runs at 6 RPMs. It just doesn't churn stuff up when a chunk of metal lays in the bottom. That's just where it stays. I am reusing these bearings. There's absolutely nothing wrong with them. They're tight and look good. More banging around. I went and cleaned these out. I've kind of been brushing around on this with a razor blade, kind of cleaning this deck surface up a little bit. These do have a drain hole in them. You've got to put this drain hole down. I guess let's stick both of these things on there. Well, it didn't work quite like I was expecting. Something like that. That top is not quite as heavy as I thought it was to begin with, but it is still a handful. I'm going to try to get it over here and wrestle it on here. Is that it? So I got all the bolts put in it. I got this cap on the other side. I put some silicone on it, got it bolted up. I did not put the shim back in here. You put a shim between this flange here, or whatever you call it, in the housing, and that's what adjusts the bearing race in and out. It takes up the lash in the bearing. Anyway, I put 2 bolts in this, and it looks like it has made up to the case, but I cannot feel any kind of lash in the gear here. And so I am going to put this shim that came out of this side, I'm going to put this one shim back in here. Now this is Sunday. I want to need to get a couple more bolts. If you remember, we twisted 2 of these off. I think that's all I'll be missing. If you notice, this shaft sticks out farther on this side than it does this side. I don't think that that's going to be a problem, but I think this whole thing, one way or another, was just something not kosher about it. I don't know if it was the original stuff or what I had made, but something just wasn't quite right here. All right, I got to put that on. Usually could take these keys by keeping dropping it in the case. Just knock them out just like that, and then hopefully this is a slip fit. Yeah, perfect. I think I said before, but this keyway is tapered. It's wider here than it is down here, and so when you drive it in there, it's what tightens this up. That didn't work. Man. I think these high dollar gears I bought is just a piece of crap, and I hate to talk crap about people, and I've been trying not to. But every single aspect of this is off. So I got the plug put back in the side of the box over there, so when we dump oil in it, it won't run out on the ground. And you're probably not going to be able to see good there, but I'm going to put just enough oil in this to fill it up to where it touches the bottom of this gear, or maybe, you know, 1/4 inch in it or something like that. I want to fix our dipstick problems. All right, I'm going to put a patented Zack Life dipstick in it here. I want this to be about as far back in this corner of the box as we can get. So I got to drop this in there. This is what scrapes oil off the bull gear here and channels it down. These little things just float, channels it down these channels. And as much as I talk about not giving a crap about how clean this stuff is, I got to clean this tray out because it's even a little bit too much for me. Y'all ever have those projects where it's like every step of the way, well, we don't have any electricity. Electricity's dead. I'm gonna go up here and see if I can figure out why. So this is another setup like a lot of them. Everything here is mine. That is electric providers. They got a set of cutouts hanging right there. In case there's a problem over here, it blows those. It doesn't kill the line. But everything here is mine. The only good thing is the meter's lit up, so probably the problem is here. And if the problem is mine, then hopefully I can fix it. So we got 480 coming in the top here. It's coming through this disconnect. It's got fuses in there. I can pull that and kill the power. It goes through the meter up the pole to my transformers. It comes out of this contactor and goes up this and to my secondary to the wells. You're getting a sneak peek here. This is some of my SCADA data acquisition crap. These here are a set of what do they call those? Varistors? They're surge protectors. So we got 480 across the 3 fuses right there. 480 comes out of those 3 fuses, goes into this phase monitor. We're getting a green light, so we got good power. We got all 3 phases. It comes out of that phase monitor and powers that little transformer. This transformer powers a couple of these. There's a client and a Wi-Fi access point up there. Where's it at? On around the corner, the access point's pointing that way towards the wells. They seem to be okay because we got a green light there. Got another little surge suppressor here. This is all 120, and this little deal is made by YZ, and I can turn this switch off and on, and this switch trips this relay, and this relay trips on that contactor, and so I can turn all this off and on with my phone. It seems for some reason though this isn't working. I'm going to power cycle this. We'll just turn the power off to it and give it a second there. If I push this button, yeah, that trips the contactor in. That's manually clicking in this relay. So my problem is all in this low voltage stuff for one reason or another. And there it went. It's kind of weird. You know, those little plugs are designed to do things like turn lights off and on in your house and whatnot. And I've got a bunch of them running, you know, industrial equipment. And they're probably not exactly designed to do that, even though that's what they're going to do. And I've had a little bit of problems before. There's one, it keeps kind of dropping out, but it'll stay on, but it loses connectivity. And I don't know, maybe all it needed was turned off and turned back on. All right, let's go back down there. Here we go. You can see the, you know, this thing's running so slow, it's not going to deliver a bunch of oil. But you can see the little brass thing here. It's wiping oil off this gear, scraping it if you would. It's dripping down and running into this trough. So to be completely honest, this thing's really not oiling very well. And I think it's probably because it's running so slow. I think what I'm going to do is I want to get some 140 weight gear oil instead of 90 and dump some 140 in there to thicken that oil up, and that'll help bring that oil up on that gear. It should deposit a little bit more oil up here. I'm going to let this run overnight without finish putting it together. Then we'll be able to check for leaks, make sure everything looks good, and I think it's a good idea to sort of let the gears run for, you know, at least a few hours, kind of let them seat. I don't know if they actually do or not, but it's not going to hurt anything to let it run overnight. Now that right there is a welding rod. So I got to rig up a dipstick, and this is a Zack Life patented dipstick system. Next morning, so everything looks good, except we got a rain shower last night and got some oil, I mean some water mixed in with the oil. But everything looks dry, everything looks good, no leaks. All right, so I got some 140 weight oil here. Again, I'm going to just fill this up until it just reaches the bottom of the high-speed gear there. Drop our little rod in it here, and I will cut this off where the oil level is at. And from now on, that's my dipstick. Now that'll be the minimum mark. Now I'm going to go ahead and put about another inch or inch and a half or something of Earl in it. Now you can see with that heavier oil how much more oil that this scrapes up and dumps in the oil trays. If it ran faster, 90 weight would have been fine, and 90 weight would probably have been fine anyway. There's not a lot of oil movement in there with it, and you know, we're not gonna hurt anything. You see that it's literally a river down on that bearing. Same way with that. Perfect. Easy to walk up here and check the oil. There won't be any more having to get a pipe wrench and shut it down and crawl down there on your hands and knees. That was a stupid design, and I don't always put all these bolts in. The reason being, when you put oil in these, the only easy way to do it is to slide the plate out of the way. You generally don't ever get any moisture inclusion here. This does have a Dutchman broke off. It's been that way a while. I may try to get that out or just stick a rag or something in it for now. But I will cover that hole up. I don't want it raining in that hole. These are a split crank arm. They break pretty easy, but you can usually drive a wedge in the crack if you can miss the bolt, and just push them on there. All right, I'm just going to line the keyway up here. Drive it home. These need to be tight, but they don't have to be stupid tight. You know, about all my weight on the end of a 24-inch wrench. If you get real dumb with them, these are kind of weak right here, these Idacos, and there's sort of a lot of mechanical advantage. The bolt's pretty good ways out. These will break. I've seen it happen quite a few times. In fact, I had a crew come put some on a bigger Idaco, and that's exactly what they did just a couple of months ago. So I got my chain put back on it. For as little dignity as I have, I couldn't record myself doing that. I know y'all are gonna give me heck, and I completely deserve it. I talked about in the last video how the skids broke. There's several things broke here, and it needs to be, the gearbox needs to be pulled off and a piece of 1/2-inch plate put down and welded out and torched back through it. And I'm gonna do that at some point, but for now the gearbox is held down with that chain. Everybody's gonna say you should have done that while you worked on it, and you're probably right, but I didn't. And when I do go to work on this, it won't be hard. All we'll have to do, we'll have to take those bolts out, which I would have had to take out anyway. We'll just leave all this together, go around this with a chain and winch truck and just pick everything up, and we won't actually have to disconnect anything, you know, other than the belt, I guess. You know, I know y'all see a lot of the things I do. There was a whole bunch of y'all all freaked out about the transformer video, and I understand. If I had an employee, I would never in a million years ever allow them to do what I did, even if they didn't care. And I know that's where a lot of the sort of extreme safety ideology comes from, and that's fine. If anybody gets killed out here, I want it to be me, and I make those stupid decisions because I'm an old man. I want to make money. I want to see this thing go up and down. people look at this and say, oh, you should have cleaned that up better. You know, a person that builds an engine said that thing should have been spotless. Machinist said you know, you should have ground that shaft. You shouldn't have just turned that on a lathe. And you know, the environmentalist says, oh, you got 2 quarts of oil on the ground there. You know, that you ought to go to jail for that. And you know, we make decisions and we decide what we think is reasonable. And I work hard to be environmentally friendly, make the stuff I've got reasonably safe for the wildlife and for the landowners. You know, I'm lucky that most of my stuff is not in town. It's not in a place that's accessible by the public, which is, you know, I could say I'm thankful for, but truthfully, I just wouldn't buy anything that was in a situation like that. I'm an old man. I can run a lathe a little bit. I can weld a little bit. I can do a few things. But I'm an old man. That's what I do for a living. This thing is ready to go. I got a bunch of tools to pick up. I got a little bit of dirt here to clean up. I guess the next thing I'm going to do is, I got to remove my come along up here. Let's do that. Let's pull this come along off here and we'll crank this sucker up. International Derrick and Equipment Company, Idaho. Date of API specification, July 1944. It's serial number 402. I don't have any idea how many they made a year, but I would bet that it was probably at least 100. I would date this to probably around 1950. It's 70 something years old. Hopefully it'll run another 70 something years. You know, this is not the only thing I do during the day is to work on this particular kind of stuff. You know, I got to check all my leases and there's paperwork and, you know, you can imagine everything else. I try to just make one trip out here. You know, if I come out here and forget something and I got to go home, that's just all the day that a project like this gets worked on, unless it's something really important, obviously. But this is Monday. Scattered it Monday and Tuesday. Set poles Wednesday, had a doctor's appointment Thursday. It rained Friday. I worked on a little bit Saturday and forgot something and couldn't do much. And we got it pretty much put together Sunday and we put the arms on it Monday. If you'll go check out that other video, it's not all specifically about this well. I'll put a link to the description and a card. I'll put it right, how about right there? You can click on it and go watch it. But talk about how this thing started off as a financial disaster, not environmental. Appreciate you watching. Catch you on the next one.